Jacksonville Symphony honors his 100th birthday in a Jacksonville Jazz Collective performance featuring the John Lumpkin Trio and a guest trumpeter. April 19th. Tickets at jacksymphony.org. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
April. Join the conversation. Give us a call on air at 904-549-2937 or head to firstcoastconnect.org where you can find all the ways.
Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump says he'll hold a news conference today in the Oval Office with military officials. He also wrote online yesterday, using profane language that we cannot repeat on the air, to threaten Iran. He's demanding that Tehran immediately reopen the Strait of Hormuz to shipping traffic. In his address last week, Trump said that European allies should do that. Iran has hit petrochemical plants in 3 Persian Gulf countries and vital infrastructure. NPR's Aya Betroe reports.
Iran launched counterstrikes over the weekend on petrochemical plants in the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Kuwait, sparking fires in all 3, according to their official statements. Iran says these plants produced fuel and products used by the U.S. military. This comes after Israel said it had bombed Iran's petrochemical industry and disabled their operations. Iran also targeted what it says is an Israeli refinery in Haifa supplying fuel to Israeli fighter jets. Meanwhile, a telecom building and a port were targeted in the UAE. That port is vital for food imports as its main port in Dubai remains inaccessible. Kuwait, though, was the hardest hit over the weekend. It says Iran attacked oil facilities, a government building, and 2 power and water desalination plants, knocking out power generation units. Aya Betroe, NPR News, Dubai.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky visited Syria over the weekend. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports Zelensky's visit comes as he recently signed security agreements with Persian Gulf nations.
Writing on social media, Zelensky said he and Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara discussed security and defense issues, as well as energy cooperation. Zelensky added that Ukraine is, quote, building new opportunities. He was in Turkey on Saturday and had traveled to several Gulf nations last week. Gulf states have been hit by Iranian Shahed drones in retaliation for the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. Russia attacks Ukrainian cities with hundreds of Shaheds a day, and Ukraine's military has learned how to intercept them. Zelensky is offering to trade this anti-drone expertise for systems that shoot down Russian ballistic missiles. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
The crew aboard the Artemis mission is getting ready to fly around the dark side of the moon. The astronauts will be out of touch with Earth for about an hour as they do the flyby. Dr. Lori Glaze is with NASA's Exploration Systems Development Program. She says the astronauts may be able to see things on the moon's surface that satellites cannot.
So we're really excited to fly by and get to take these observations. Particularly having humans on board really complements the robotic exploration that goes on from NASA.
The astronauts are about to set a distance record. They will be the first humans to fly this far away from the Earth, more than 250,000 miles from home. You're listening to NPR.
Good morning. You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. The state of Florida has approved a conservation land deal to conserve nearly 1,500 acres of cattle and timberland in Putnam and Madison counties. The area in Putnam County will prevent development on the 390-acre Etonaya Creek Tract cattle and timber operation about 2 miles east of the Etonian Creek State Forest. The Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services spent $1.3 million for the land. One Florida state representative is pushing to bypass the legislature and use the citizen initiative process to get a proposed property tax cut in front of voters. State Representative Ryan Chamberlain says he wants to ban ad valorem taxes on real estate from any level of government. The plan would then force the legislature to create a new funding process for police, fire departments, and schools. Chamberlain says he doesn't expect any meaningful reform to be passed by lawmakers during a potential special session this year.
I'm very pessimistic about whether or not we're going to see any major, I'd love to see it, but whether or not we're going to see any major relief or anything on the ballot. It could happen, but I'm not feeling it.
The deadline to submit petitions to get onto this November's ballot is already passed, so this attempt would not get onto the ballot until November 2028. During this year's regular session, the House approved a property tax elimination proposal, but the Senate did not take it up. Rain chances increase this afternoon and evening for parts of northeast Florida. It'll be a relatively cool day with temperatures in the upper 60s to lower 70s.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Lilly Endowment, a private foundation supporting NPR's coverage of religion and spirituality, and Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
5 Nocketees worth of homes. That's what the city of Jacksonville needs to meet its 50,000 affordable housing deficit. Welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, how the city of Jacksonville is addressing a critical housing shortage even as the city's population continues to boom. Later in the program, a new literacy report exposes gaps in Duval's early intervention efforts, and an upcoming bookstore crawl urges readers and writers to take it slow in the month of April. But first, from looser zoning laws to creative financing, the city of Jacksonville and other cities around the country are exploring a variety of ways to boost their stock of affordable housing. It's a priority reflected by the administration's decision to name the city's first affordable housing director. And he joins me now, Joshua Hicks. Thanks for being here.
Of course. Thank you, Ann.
So you are up against a challenge. This is a city in which more than a third of households qualify for affordable housing, and yet there is a kind of enormous shortage of affordable housing units. Tell us a little bit, first of all, just about what the task is when it comes to affordable housing. What is affordable housing?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a big task, but I think it's a blessing and a curse. As a community, you want to grow, right? And one of our strengths as a community is we're adding 17,000 people a year. So we're growing rapidly. But the curse is when we weren't addressing the affordability crisis when it was time, like other cities have done, you fall behind. And right now we have fallen behind. So it's a big lift, but we are making progress, as we're going to talk about today. And we still are facing important challenges. But affordable housing is really, it's a wide spectrum of below market rate, housing that somebody can afford. It gets a bad rap sometimes because some people tie it to the old school 50, 60 years ago public housing, and that's not what affordable housing is anymore. Affordable housing is housing that goes for police officers, teachers, nurses, clerical workers, you name it. Folks who make below the market rate level of income as provided by the area median income, who need housing that's affordable in our community. And as you just listed, we have 59% of our renters are cost burden. That means they're paying more than 30% of their annual income on housing and utilities. We know 22% or more of homeowners are cost burden. Same statistic, paying more than 30% of their income on housing and utilities. These are individuals who need affordability. They need, cheaper housing. They need cheaper food, cheaper, healthcare. So anything that we can do on the housing side of things to lower costs there will allow people to, stretch their incomes a lot further in other areas. So I think affordability is just making sure people can have a house that they can afford.
And it is a term that has a sliding definition in some ways, according to income, right? I mean, for some people, you talk about people who, for instance, earn less than the market, than sort of the average family income for the area. What is it? Average median income, the
Average
AMI.
median income.
So if people who are earning 80% of that, which is about $82,000 a year or less, affordable for them is considered about $2,300 a month.
Correct.
For somebody who's earning 30% of that, affordable is $900 a month. And so when you are trying to encompass the universe of affordable housing in your job, who are you talking to?
Yeah, you're talking to everyone. You just hit some numbers off, right, very clearly in terms of 30% AMI. Somebody could be making about $21,000 a year, and that's $600 a month max for a one-bedroom apartment. Somebody who's making 80% AMI is making $55,000 a year. They can be paying $1,500 or $1,600 a month max for a one-bedroom apartment. So you're talking $1,000, gap between 80 and 30% AMI. You're talking a huge income gap, but anyone who's within 30 and 80% is in the affordable range. Anything lower than 30% gets into extremely low income. That's what Jacksonville Housing Authority really focuses on with their vouchers and all of that support that they get from federal HUD. Anything above 80%, you get into workforce housing. Anything above 120% AMI, the area median income, you get into market rates. So that 30 to 80% range for affordable housing is so large, and quite frankly, what's affordable for you might not be affordable for me, and vice versa. So we really need to focus on building the housing ecosystem for all of these ranges to make sure we have the supply in place so folks, depending on their income, can pick and choose their housing.
I think a lot of people, even if they're not necessarily falling into those thresholds you're describing, feel like housing has gotten unaffordable. This is a market in which the median home is almost $400,000. So a Jacksonville resident needs about $120,000 a year in household income to afford that. That is far and away more than a lot of people in this area make, where the median income is around $80,000. And so some of those people that may or may not necessarily fall into your wheelhouse still feel that there's a strain on their income, but they perhaps don't qualify as rent burdened. Is that right?
That's correct. They might. 59% of renters, that's probably including a lot of folks at the workforce and market rate level.
Okay.
2 or 3 bedroom at market rate is going to be, somewhere in the $25,000 to $3,000 range a month. You can get a mortgage these days way cheaper than that, so they would be considered cost burden. So it's, again, each person is different. Each person is unique because of their own, income level. But I think one of the things we really need to do is grow the housing ecosystem for all incomes. Make sure that we're not just focused solely on, affordable housing, which is where our deficits are the largest. We only have 30 units available for every 100 households that need it at 30% AMI as an example. You get to 80% AMI, we have 84 units for every 100 households that need it. You get to 100% AMI, which is workforce housing, we have 100 households for every 100 households that need it. So you see where the deficit is. It's as you get lower in the income, that's where we get anything 50% AMI or lower. We're 50,000 units short of where we should be. So, but we can't forget that, we still need to build workforce housing. We still need to build market rate housing.
What is the reason for the deficit at those lower ends? Is it's just not profitable for developers?
It's not profitable for developers. Absolutely. You don't have the incentives always being provided to make it worth their while. So they're going to build market rate, which they can get a return on investment for the money that they're putting in. And it's much easier to, make the numbers match versus doing something at the 50 or 30 or the affordable housing level. So you really need those incentives to make up the gap. The gap was created mainly at no fault, really. It was the market. We had the real estate market collapse of 2008, where nationwide housing production just cratered. And it took about 15 years to get that housing production back up to where it needed to be. But then we had COVID. And then post-COVID, you had the real estate boom where everything, you had cash and houses were, going off the market, $100,000, $200,000 more than they were worth. That priced a lot of people out of the market because you saw the surge in prices, whether it's home ownership, the mortgage price, whether it's rental prices. If you owned a rental property and you saw another rental property across the street just hiked their rents up $500, you're probably gonna hike yours up. So you saw prices increase. We didn't have the supply in place to be able to then take people who were being priced out of the market and put them into other housing. So you also saw our eviction rate go up. Jacksonville, unfortunately, is the eviction capital of Florida. We have 82 evictions for every 1,000 households. That needs to come down. We didn't have the supply in place, the housing supply in place to
Has
help
that
those people
remained
out.
steady since COVID, or is that rising or declining?
It has remained steady now. We are working on getting it down. We, obviously, thanks to the City Council, the Critical Quality of Life Committee with Councilman Boylan, did the eviction diversion program, which is a product of Jewish Families, United Way, and Jala. That's helping just in the first 3 years over 650 families stay housed.
We're looking right now at a map, that's sort of a heat map of evictions in the Jacksonville area. And for people who are watching our live stream, you can see that there's sort of a concentrated area, particularly in the northwest part of Jacksonville, and then some neighborhoods that, have had some economic issues. So in your work, do you do any particular focus in those areas?
My work is countywide, and that's one of the really important things to note is that everyone needs affordability, and we should be building affordable housing in every single district. Since the mayor was elected, we launched an affordable housing transparency dashboard, which you can see on jacksonville.gov under the transparency button. But we have affordable housing projects going on in 12 of the 14 council districts because affordability is important. There are obviously areas that are getting more of the affordable housing projects for whatever reason, but my focus is countywide and making sure that we're addressing it countywide.
And there have been projects in most of the districts, right?
There have. 12 of the 14 districts have a project going on. I think we're missing one in 12, which is Councilman White's district, and we're missing one in Councilman Gay's district in 2. By the end of the year, I've said this to other news outlets, by the end of the year, my goal is to have them in all 14
all of them.
districts.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to the city's affordable housing director, Josh Hicks. If you have questions about affordable housing issues, you can join our conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937, or you can go to firstcoastconnect.org to submit a question or find how to connect with us on social. So we talked about a 50,000 home deficit, affordable housing deficit in Jacksonville. How does Jacksonville compare to other cities in terms of, a per capita gap when it comes to affordable housing?
We're running behind where we should be, but other cities, we got a lot of money through the emergency rental assistance program from the feds during COVID. Jacksonville got a lot of money during that, but we put it towards eviction, rental assistance programs and eviction diversion programs to make sure people could stay housed.
Was that the proper use, do you think?
We didn't have the supply, so yes, it was. We could have managed the money a little bit better. We've had some of it come back recently, which allowed us, when I got into this position, to actually build housing with it. So it was a blessing. But we should have been focused on building the supply earlier than we were. Some of the cities also used that eviction diversion or emergency rental assistance money, which they call ERAP, to actually put into building more housing. So they got a 5-10 year head start than we did.
Gotcha.
But over the course of since 22-23, we've really focused on tail end of the Curry administration into the Deegan administration has really focused on building up the housing supply. Workforce housing was the focus of the Curry administration. Affordable housing has been the focus of the Deegan administration because you see the numbers. We get them from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. We get them from Schimberg Center at the University of Florida. You get them from the First Coast Apartment Association. All the numbers basically jive in terms of where we are in terms of falling short in terms of the housing supply. So we don't need more studies. We know where we need to correct things, and it really starts with the housing supply, making sure that we're building the supply that we need as a growing community, while also being mindful that we already have supply on the market. Let's make sure that we're rehabbing that supply to keep those units available, keep them affordable, and also keep people housed who are currently in housing. The worst thing we can do is forget about people who are homeowners or people who are already in housing and don't give them a leg up or assist them in making sure that they can stay housed, because that'll take the burden off of our already deep, housing deficit that we have. And That's why in the housing division at the city of Jacksonville, we have federal and state dollars that we use for rehab programs, rehab and repair programs, down payment assistance. We have, heirs property, making sure people realize that when you have a death in the family, that, the house is in the mortgage or is in the will to make sure it falls to a family member and you don't lose that house to an investor. It's a big part of creating that generational wealth for families, and we need to make sure that homes are passed down and they don't just be they're not bought out behind them. So the housing division, we're able to do a lot of this with our federal and state dollars, but really what you're seeing with other cities, why they've had a head start is they've gotten significant investment from the local level, from the local governments in terms of housing programs, in terms of development, that Jacksonville has been lagging behind on.
We have a question in the email from Brittany saying, are they going to stop short-term rentals and commercial companies from buying up the affordable inventory? That would appear connected to this recent legislation at the federal level that addresses corporate, kind of large-scale corporate ownership of rental units and housing units. So how does that fit into the city's priorities? And how much of a priority is it for you? Is that a concern to see these kind of corporate investors?
It is a concern a little bit, more than a little bit, actually. One, that legislation still needs to pass. I think it's being held up in the House of Representatives at the moment. So hopefully, I think we're talking the Road to Housing Act. Hopefully that does. I did an interview recently. Hopefully the House of Representatives does pass that, because it would bring millions and millions of more dollars into Jacksonville on the federal level that it's our taxpayer dollars that we can use for housing production. But to your question, 40%, around 40% of properties are owned by corporate investors, out-of-state corporate investors. We can't get those properties back. So what we can do now is work with like the Community Land Trust. I know you had Robin on the show not too long ago talking about getting the Community Land Trust off the ground. What we can do is make sure that any of these properties, especially for single family, lots, go ahead and get them in the Community Land Trust. Even if we're not ready to build on them, get them in the Community Land Trust because it protects them. A corporate, investor or a state investor can't come in and buy it. It's guaranteed affordable once we do develop on it, and it protects the land. So you see some cities like Orlando have 5,000-6,000 properties in their Community Land Trust because they're basically stacking the properties to protect them from these out-of-state entities coming in and jacking up the price, because you have a lot of people who don't live in Jacksonville. They're coming here. Jacksonville's a growing town. Why wouldn't you want to come here, build some housing, and then they're going back to where they live with no consequences on what they're charging people here. And when inflation is hard, when price of living is high and incomes aren't keeping up with all of that, one thing we need to make sure that we're focused on is if we can have programs in place to keep housing costs low, let's get those programs in place. If we can work with developers to build more affordable housing by incentivizing them, especially through loans, money that the city will get back over time, and we get housing units because of that, seems like a win-win to me, and we should do more of that.
Incentivizing is one avenue. Compelling is another. And there have been large-scale developments that in the past, county governments or city governments have mandated you have to set aside a portion. If you want approval for this planned unit development or whatever it is, you have to build some affordable housing. And a lot of times developers, once they get that approval down the road, will realize, well, they can make a lot more money producing homes that are more expensive and perhaps less affordable. And there isn't a lot of enforcement teeth when it comes to those late stage changes. Is that something that you think the city is doing a good enough job in terms of, asking at the front end for a component that's affordable and then enforcing that later on in the development cycle?
We are now. No, we can't mandate affordability. The state has removed the city's ability to mandate affordability. It was done through Live Local Act and slightly before that.
That was just last year, right?
They've made four changes to Live Local. So they just passed another amendment on Live Local with YIGB, Yes in God's Backyard. Being able to build housing, affordable housing on church properties. So we're going to start working with churches on that legislation.
And that sort of cuts out the local government from being able to say no on certain projects.
Certain projects, absolutely. But in terms of mandating affordability, we're not allowed to say, okay, you have to build 50% of these units or else, nothing. We can encourage it. And I think that's what we're starting to do. And that's what we are doing is we're working with some of these developers. And if, quite frankly, if If it's just going to be all market rate, then sometimes our focus is, well, you need to find the money elsewhere. If you're going to add a percentage, 20, 30, 40%, whatever that percentage is, where they can make their financial gap still work and we get affordable units for, the city might be more willing to incentivize and work with that developer to find, maybe they have a $3 million gap. Let's find money from our revolving loan fund in housing, our federal and state dollars, to cover that gap. Let's go to the city council and see if there's a way to offer rev grants, which is sometimes it's a rev grant, which is a property tax exemption. Offer a rev grant over a period of 15 or 20 years for those affordable units. So we are trying to have each. I stay busy because I talk with a lot of developers, and each conversation is around, okay, we're not mandating it has to be all affordable. If you're building a market rate project and you want to add 30% of the units as affordable housing, which we're doing with a project in Springfield right now, actually, then we will work with you to make sure to cover that gap to add that 30% of the units as affordable, and then you get the other 70% that still is going to be workforce and market rate, because ultimately that's a win for the city, because originally that project had no affordability in it. Mm-hmm. So if we can do that more, then we're not going to have to incentivize developers as much, because we're going to start building the supply. If every project or every other project has some affordability to it, we're going to be able to add units at a fast rate, because we are building. One of the biggest complaints I hear is, another apartment complex or another neighborhood, another subdivision. Well, as I started off this interview by saying, we're adding 17,000 people a year. We're the fastest growing city in Florida. We're the 10th fastest growing city in the country, and we're the 10th largest city in the country. We have to build housing. We have to build affordable housing for our community to live in, so that they want to raise a family here, so that they want to stay here, so that they want to continue to grow the Jacksonville that we all want to see succeed. So it's a big undertaking, but I think we are producing a lot of housing right now because we have to.
Philosophically, though, we're seeing a change perhaps from the past, where there was greater deference given to the wishes of local residents when it came to developments within their neighborhoods. And we're also seeing a scaling back of whether it's zoning protections. Certainly single-family zoning has lost some of its luster in recent years. A lot of people equate it almost with redlining in terms of creating exclusionary zones for housing. At the same time, there are people who care greatly about, say, the tree canopy. And we're seeing in the city of Jacksonville a pullback when it comes to affordable housing and enforcing certain elements of the tree ordinance, requirements for paying into the fund or leaving certain trees as protected trees. And so I would imagine that's a little bit of a difficult balance, or perhaps it's just a pendulum swing.
It is a difficult balance, I think. One of the things we stress is smart development. We're never going to put a skyrise in the middle of the neighborhood. That doesn't make sense to me. Middle of a single-family neighborhood, right?
Skyrise, what is your definition?
As in something 4 stories or higher, something large. Okay. You're not going to put a multifamily project in the middle of a single-family neighborhood. It's one of those things, at least I'm never going to. So you heard last year there was some debate in city council about missing middle. And missing middle development, those are the cottages, the townhomes, the condo building type styles, and that's a great alternative for downtown with all the infield lots that need to be filled. It has its time and place, right? It might not be best for Arlington or San Marco or some of these neighborhoods that don't have the space to build those types of developments in. So it is a figuring out, it's a puzzle in terms of figuring out what makes sense. But I think for me, you always need to have the community in mind, and you always have to have neighborhood input. Ultimately, everybody wants to build more housing, but there's a way to do it, and there's a smart way to do it. And I think there's a lot of land available out there right now. We are looking at changing the medium density residential zoning and the high density residential zoning to fit more affordability into those areas, which are already zoned for larger projects, right? And leaving the low density areas, which are the single family neighborhoods, alone for now, because we don't want to, alienate neighborhoods. We don't want to put something that a neighborhood doesn't want in the community. And again, Jacksonville has a lot of land. So it is a balancing act. But I think one of the commitments that the mayor has made and I've made and this administration is making sure that we always listen to the community and get their feedback, and making sure that the Planning Commission and all of them, hear that feedback, because the best thing people can do is use their voice for good.
We're talking to Joshua Hicks. He is the housing director, the affordable housing director for the city of Jacksonville. And you can join our conversation on air at 904-549-2937. We have a call from Catherine in downtown Jacksonville. Good morning, Catherine. Go ahead.
And thanks. Joshua, I've met with you probably about a year ago, and I've met with a lot of different people in the city and different developers. We have a technology that would allow us to build more affordable housing that has lower cost maintenance. And other municipalities across the country have partnered with people like us who can do 3D construction out of concrete. And so we can create a house that is lower maintenance, lower upkeep. It's rodent-proof, hurricane-proof, fire-proof. And so it would be a perfect solution for the infield housing. And I've tried to partner. I had a partnership going with Habijacks when it was Habijacks. And then with the change of CEO, we haven't been able to get back in there. I've talked to the CDC and Land Trust about it. I've talked with all these different people. I just want to partner with someone to let us do a spec house, and then we would have an affordable individual house, not a high rise or anything, but we would definitely be able to supply that. And I'm just wondering, what would you suggest? How can we get the city to give this sort of housing for affordable housing a try?
It does seem, Josh, that could be a way for the city to sort of lead on this topic. And this is a mayor that has expressed an interest in sort of innovative solutions. Is that something that you've seriously discussed?
100%. We discuss it every month, every week. There's container homes, there are modular homes, and Catherine, good to hear from you. There's modular homes, there's manufactured homes, there's 3D printing homes. There in Texas, they're doing a bunch of 3D printing. These huge, 3D printing, facilities, and you couldn't tell the difference between a subdivision here and there, other than you can tell it's 3D printed. But when you get in the house, it looks amazing. We want to bring that to Jacksonville. I'll reach out again this week, Catherine, to see what we can do there. Now, our struggle is sometimes we have funding restrictions. A lot of the money that we use are federal and state dollars, and if we're not allowed to use those dollars for a certain type of housing, like manufactured housing is restricted right now, then we don't have any local money to be able to provide these projects, to even do a spec house. So sometimes we do have to jump through some hoops because we have to listen to what the federal government and whatever the state government is telling us we can use this money on in terms of housing. That's why we need more local funding into addressing the housing crisis that we have here in Jacksonville. You see a lot of cities across the country putting local resources not only into development, but into the programs like homelessness prevention programs or down payment assistance programs or the eviction diversion program that I talked about earlier. That is a fantastic program that we want to see continued.
But is there anything that would prevent, for instance, the mayor from saying we're going to devote our affordable housing dollars to a 3D printed project?
No, not at all. If we get the right project and we want to incentivize that project to make it happen, we would just have to go in front of the council and get them to approve it. I think you see we're willing to do that on projects. We just got a $5 million loan committed to with the Campbell Cove project with Vescor. That's 240 units of affordable housing near the town center. That's going to happen in 2028. And it's not going to cost the city a penny because we're going to get all $5 million back with interest, over a period of time. And we put a LORA on those properties, so it's guaranteed affordable.
You put a what?
Land use restriction agreement on the property, which guarantees affordability over a period of time.
Gotcha.
So for that one, it's an 18-year affordability, so you don't have to worry about getting it built and then next year them raising the prices. So it's really a good effort to keep things affordable for a long period of time.
I want to take a call from Susan in Fruit Cove. Good morning, Susan. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Hi, Susan.
I just want to mention how difficult it is for ordinary people to fall into that place of not being able to afford housing. The highest reason for people declaring bankruptcy is not being able to pay for health care. And some of this thing, they have some kind of a tragedy, cancer or some other operation that they cannot pay for their health care. And then they get behind in the rent or the, whatever mortgage. And it's so difficult. I think most of us don't know how hard it is to maintain. And it isn't just one thing. I get so frustrated when we talk about housing as if it's a separate thing when it's connected to all the rest of our lives. So I just want people to find a place of understanding how difficult it is. And I'm so thankful that you're working on this with such diligence. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Catherine. I also want to take just briefly a call from Shamari in Hyde Park. Good morning, Shamari. Go ahead.
Good morning, y'all. I hope y'all are doing good. Joshua, I just wanted to ask, because you are housing, I wanted to ask your opinion, because I know you have access to all kinds of reports and data from all around the country. You've been around. What is your opinion on density in the urban core, especially downtown, and the number of residential units needed downtown for us to really get that boom going? If you recall, during the last mayoral, they kept a lot of the candidates kept throwing this number out there: 10,000 doors, 10,000 units. But based on how we received the award of the Super Bowl in 2005, and some of the data that went with that, we had to get the cruise ships, and they were like, hey, you guys will never get another Super Bowl unless you have like 25,000 more hotel rooms or something like that. So when you use a number like that, a metric like that, compared to what the rhetoric of 10,000 new doors or 10,000 units, do you really think that's realistic, 10,000, or do we need more? And in what amount of time do we need more?
Thanks, Shamari.
Thank you. That's a great question. So I don't work a ton in the downtown area because we do have DIA, but there are some projects happening in La Villa and the Cathedral District, and and a few other areas that do involve affordable housing. So working with them where I can, but I do think that 10,000 number is a start. I don't think that's the end all be all. I think we need more density than that. I think you hit the nail on the nose when it comes to, we had cruise ships come in for the Super Bowl. We need more hotels. We need more, more retail in downtown. And the way to get that is by bringing in more people. So we have to start somewhere. So I know Colin, the new DIA person, CEO, has said 10,000. And that's a good start, especially with the Gateway project, the Related Group project. I think there's a senior tower going to be built not too long ago, or not too in the near future, with Fleet Landing, Corner Lot. All these companies are starting to build downtown, and that's good because we do need to bring the density back. We, as a county, and this is my opinion, but we expanded too rapidly. Mm-hmm. We're such a large county with not the greatest transportation system, if I'm being honest. So we expanded too fast. So let's bring it back a little bit so that JTA can focus on transportation in the urban core and in the downtown area. Let's make sure that we're building the housing that we need downtown in the urban core, and then expand out once we have that resolved. So I think 10,000 is the start. I would love to see more, but I don't work day to day in the DIA field. A lot of our affordable housing projects that I'm part of are countywide projects that, like I said earlier, in 12 of the 14 districts that we're hoping to get in all of them. And some of them do include downtown. But the mayor is right. We need to continue to put the focus in downtown because that's going to be an economic engine for the city in the future, bringing in more money into the budget so that we can then put more money into the community to support everyone who, whether it's need housing or, like the previous caller said, healthcare, and other sources of support that they need to make sure that they can have a good quality of life.
All right. Well, we should note that Jacksonville Today and WJCT News is part of an affordable housing reporting partnership that is covering this issue and will continue to cover it. But Josh Hicks, great to have you here. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Great to be here. Hope to be back sometime soon.
All right.
Thanks, Ann.
Up next, reading between the lines of a new report on early literacy. Welcome back. From increased use of teaching technology to expanding VPK hours, a new report suggests strategies for boosting early literacy on the First Coast. But the report comes out at a time of declining funding and limited resources. Here to discuss the findings is Rachel Tutwiler Fortune. She is president of the nonprofit think tank, the Jacksonville Public Education Fund. Rachel, thanks so much for coming back on.
Thanks for having me, Ann.
So I was glad to see this report. It really is a broad look at how agencies, educational providers, nonprofits are working and what improvements are needed. Is there anything in this report that you think is truly surprising to people who work in this field?
Yeah, I think hopefully it doesn't come as a surprise because we have such a strong ecosystem of partners who have been working on literacy for a very long time. But I think the biggest insight from this research is that we have what it takes in our community if we better align ourselves to really make progress on the thing we all agree we need to move the needle on. And so what we're seeking to do is to highlight what's working, also to identify where we can work better together to help accelerate progress.
And it sounds big picture that the need is for greater collaboration, coordination. I feel like that is a common symptom of the nonprofit world in general, not just here, but everywhere. That you have a lot of agencies doing really good work, kind of grinding themselves into the center of the earth each day, and yet perhaps not realizing there's duplication of effort, there's resources that could be better allocated, that there could be just better communication all around.
That's right. And, I think unfortunately what partners sometimes fail to realize is if we do take a step back and set those shared measures of success, if we kind of operate with data transparency and we're able to move together in that truly cohesive manner, we actually may be able to unlock even more support to help us drive even greater progress.
There is, I would guess, though, some resistance to that. People can be a little territorial, especially when they've got their own little universe of nonprofit priorities. And so when you issue a report like this, what do you do to kind of convince people that there might be benefit in letting down some of those walls, sharing some of that information that they have, sharing some of the resources that they already have?
Yeah. So at the Jacksonville Public Education Fund, we have been a part of this cohesive, I will say, community of partners who have been working on this issue for a really long time. And, we're committed to working alongside partners like the Community Foundation for Northeast Florida, who has already raised their hand to kind of be the backbone of Read Jacks as we move forward. And what it's really going to take is setting the table, making sure that partners who have been at the table, those who, need to be invited to the table are there, and that we kind of break down what those barriers are for individual partners to make sure that we can move forward in a manner that truly has that strong foundation of trust, and that people don't feel it's a gotcha, because we're all kind of in this together. And at the end of the day, like, we know what's at stake for our community. And if we don't get this right, unfortunately, we're going to produce similar outcomes to those we've seen in the past.
So let's talk a little bit about just where we are in terms of, reading and early literacy. This is a time when literacy rates, generally speaking, are in decline. You are focused primarily on the early literacy cohort, which is sort of, birth to third grade. And that has not been a shining success anywhere. And it is getting more challenging for teachers. It is getting more challenging for educators, partly because of this, what some are even calling a post-literate society, a place that we're moving where a lot of people are not reading, where college students aren't made to read books in their entirety, where people sometimes go years at a time without reading anything except their screens. And so that seems almost like a tidal shift that is going to be very hard in the early literacy area to push back against.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think you categorize, or you kind of reflect some of the reality of the present moment well in that comment. One of the things that I hope this research does shine a light on is how these foundational literacy skills are going to be important no matter sort of what technological enhancements we see in the future. We have to make sure we don't forget to continue to focus on the basics. Mm-hmm. We need critical thinking. We need students and adults who are literate. One of the things we talk about in this research is how some of what is a barrier to student success is the fact that we have such challenges related to adult literacy in our community as well. And so we cannot afford to keep our eye off the ball when it comes to keeping those strong foundational skills, even as we leverage new technologies to help us iterate and to innovate in new ways in the future.
I wonder though if, I mean, just sort of curiosity, if literacy might be somewhat the wrong frame. I feel like literacy is we've learned a lot about brain science, how learning to read, being able to read long form attention spans, it actually shapes and reshapes your brain. And so it's not just that you're learning how to actually do the skill that could perhaps be done by AI or some sort of translation technique, but it actually allows people to learn how to control their emotions and how to think creatively. And
100%.
that perhaps by framing it as simply a literacy skill, we're underestimating the selling point.
Oh, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more with that. We're talking about life skills. We're talking about critical thinking. We're talking about creating the creative leaders of tomorrow, people who can problem solve. One thing that's true about literacy skills is they help unlock all of those other capabilities as well. And so, unfortunately, I think because people just kind of see literacy as this thing that's aside, we aren't making those connections in a way that really sort of unlocks how, when we are producing literate students, but also creative thinkers and people who can problem solve, what we're talking about is producing those life skills that will help benefit the totality of our community and ensure longer term economic success.
So one of the specific issues that this report looks at is voluntary pre-K, which, Florida has sort of led on in some ways in terms of making that free and accessible, but it isn't a day-long program. So tell us a little bit about what VPK does provide and what the report suggests might be an improvement on what we have.
Yeah. So I'll take a step back first to say, what the report is identifying is an opportunity for greater alignment from birth to third. Like, we are not doing as much as we could as a community when it comes to ensuring that those who are providing support in the early learning setting are connected to, and so, there's a continuum of services being provided, so to speak, when students kind of progress into elementary and beyond. And so we want to make sure that we're having intentional dialogue and engaging in aligned action across the board. As it relates to VPK, we have some proof points in our community. As you mentioned, we are seeing great progress when students are in quality early learning centers and able to kind of get that start, and I shouldn't say start, because students are already learning a lot of skills really before they come out of their mother's womb.
Sure.
Learning starts very much early in life, and so it's in that formalized setting that we are helping to cultivate some of those skills that we know students are going to need to thrive in when they get to their more advanced learning in schooling throughout kind of primary and secondary schooling. But we have an opportunity in our community to look at what's working in these VPK settings that are providing quality learning for our students, and how do we make sure that we are providing that to more children? How do we also make sure that we are fully leveraging that support and that opportunity, as you mentioned, making sure that if there is an opportunity, we can keep students in those classrooms even longer. That's supportive as well to some of the
more like a full day.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's supportive to parents who may be struggling to figure out, what do I do with my child if I'm going to put them in an early learning setting, but
have to go get them at noon.
Go get them at noon.
Right. It's not super helpful. I want to ask about politicization, and just briefly, because we've just got a brief minute left, but it is something the report notes, and it is an undeniable reality. There's a lot of shift in how both parties are tackling education, and their priorities have changed a lot. How do you help educators and the people in your field either move beyond that or work within it?
Yeah. At the end of the day, this work is about our students. This work is about ensuring that they have what they need to thrive. And there's a lot of common ground across, most partners when it comes to making sure that we're keeping students at the center. And so the question becomes, how do we make sure that we are bringing various stakeholders to the table so that we can make sure that we talk about what we understand the data are telling us about what we need to do for our young people?
Do you believe that there is common ground? I mean, right now we're seeing, much more focus from, I think, Democrats on things like healthy wraparound services, nutrition, mental health, and Republicans seem much more focused on kind of refinancing or at least focusing more on the financing, giving money back to parents, empowering parents. Is there a shared conversation being had at the political level?
At the political level, I think there is an opportunity for us to make sure that we're doing a better job, if I'm being, completely honest. And I also think there is, your first question was, is there alignment and are there kind of points of common ground? And I think when it comes to the fact that we want what's best for our student, there's absolutely common ground. I tend to be a person who thinks very, optimistically about where we can take things. And if we are intentional about, talking about those shared aspirations that we have for our city, for our young people, for our community overall, we can continue to make progress on these very important efforts.
Well, it's a great report. We've got a link for it on our website. Rachel Tutwiler-Fortune of JPEF, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Anne. I really appreciate you having me.
All right. Up next, why the path to creativity is best explored at a snail's pace. Thanks.
Riverside Avondale Preservation invites you to the 52nd Annual Home Tour, presented by the Historic Collective, April 11th and 12th, featuring a curated tour of 11 properties in the Historic District. Tickets and information available at riversideavondale.org. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Highway, hospital, home, work. Where injuries happen can make a difference in the law and the outcome.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
We're putting together a little pop-up series on religious fundamentalism in two countries, Shia Islam in Iran and Christian nationalism in the U.S. First, Iran. Before 1979, the country wasn't always a Shia Muslim theocracy.
The end of Iran's monarchy came early today when Khomeini's followers took control of the palace of the Shah.
What lessons can the U.S. learn from why that changed in Iran? That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
Both Iran and the U.S. have been accused of committing or planning war crimes since Operation Epic Fury began. Actions like targeting electricity generating stations or water purifying plants. Both are illegal under international law. But what does it mean to label military action a war crime in today's conflicts? That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. April 25th is Independent Bookstore Day, and local women writers are offering a month-long pre-party to get us there. Here to tell us about their upcoming book crawl is organizer Jennifer Wolf. She's the founder and executive director of Women Writing for a Change Jacksonville. Jennifer, good morning.
Good morning.
We are also joined by Olivia Vo. She is a group board member and a facilitator of the crawl. Good morning, Olivia.
Good morning.
So the theme of this book crawl throughout the month of April is sort of slowing down, and the inspiration is a memoir by an author named Elizabeth Tova Bailey. Tell us about The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating and why that is inspiring this particular month-long effort.
Thank you. So last year when we first kicked off the snail trail, so many people came up to me and was like, have you heard of this book? Have you read it? And I had no idea that it existed, but it sounded like so perfect, The Sound of Wild Snail Eating. And just the intention behind stillness. You know, this woman was suffering through an illness. She was bedridden. So it's just her and her snail companion. And everything was so still that she could observe and hear and listen for the snail eating, you know, the leaves and the grass that was in the terrarium.
Yeah,
So-
and it's a beautiful book, and it really is a great message for sort of careful, close observance. And that's something, obviously, that writing requires. So tell us, first of all, about Women Writing for a Change. This is a group that you started a few years ago, Jennifer. Why?
I think that in today's day and age, it's really important to create safe spaces for people to gather. And as a woman and as a writer, I particularly was inspired to create safe spaces for women writers, just not exclusively. And there was a group
founded 30-some years ago in Cincinnati called Women Writing for a Change. And my sister lives in Cincy, and she said, Jen, I think they might need one of these down in Jacksonville. And so I was certified and purchased an affiliation. And so we're an affiliate group. And for now over 10 years, we have been gathering people, not just women, but also any vulnerable population, community groups, and creating a circle as a kind of sacred space for the words and the ideas that we need to express. And we're especially protective of that, of course, today. And the need is even greater.
And so what happens at one of these writing circles? You've got 3 bookstores that are going to be participating over a series of Saturdays. But what actually occurs?
We're going to write. And actually, I'll let Olivia talk about that because this was her brainchild. We wanted to create programming in the community that's accessible.
Okay.
I think for the past couple years, Women Writing for Change has hosted book festivals. And then when it came time to sunset that, we wanted to really build upon the relationships we had with locally owned small independent bookstore owners who are female. And we want to support that. And building upon those relationships, we approached them the idea, why not gather people together in these spaces surrounded by the books and diving into words and poetry to make meaning of that. So what happens is you see strangers coming together, writing for the first time, maybe just unlocking something within them, and then just being community and also visiting places that they might not otherwise have gotten to, like the North Side, where there's a beautiful bookstore called Cafe Resistance, and then visiting a new bookshop that just opened up in Avondale, the Next Chapter Bookshop.
And so are these events where there's like a writing prompt? Are people supposed to bring some sort of gear with them? Do they need their laptops, their notebooks? How does it work?
A notebook and a pen.
Okay.
And if not, the bookstore has them available.
Yeah. The idea is generally in our writing circles, we will have the facilitator, in this case, Olivia, will have an agenda that she's very carefully prepared based on the text of the book, The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating. And then we create the space, have a moment of quiet, work through some poems, a poem and some quotes as inspiration, and then we just write. And the important thing is once we've written, then we have the opportunity to share. And people for the first time are getting to really witness somebody in their raw creative process coming to insights about their particular take on this content. And it's not just writing, but also listening. And we call it, the act of deep listening and intimate listening. And so that's what we're creating.
And are you appealing to, is this for writers who are looking to, say, get published, or is this for writers hoping to just sort of unlock something in themselves and, journal more effectively?
Both. But primarily, if you're someone that can write, you're a writer.
Yeah.
And it's messy, and it's okay to be messy. So I think that's also what we were trying to encourage. These are raw first drafts, not edited, and there's a lot of power to that.
Well, the event, as we said, it's all through April. It's April 11th at Happy Medium Bookstore in Riverside. It is April 18th at the Next Chapter in Avondale, and it's April 25th at Cafe Resistance on the North Side. We've got a link on our website. Jennifer Wolf, Olivia Vo, thanks so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne.
And that's our program. Thanks for listening. Thanks to everybody who called in or emailed. We encourage your feedback and suggestions on any of our topics. You can submit both at firstcoastconnect.org, and you can also find all of our past and current shows there. First Coast Connect is produced by Stacey Bennett. Our associate producer is Isabella Casapow. Our show is directed by Brady Coram, and our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Join us tomorrow for our monthly house call with Dr. Joe Servin when we discuss the best time of day to get chemo and why some of the most highly processed foods are baby foods. I'm
Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. Cummer Museum presents a Spring Garden concert featuring Dustin Monk and The Hustle, presented by PNC. This band brings a blend of roots, blues, and funk to the museum's gardens on Saturday, April 18th. Tickets and information available at cummermuseum.org.